New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, he's here, has been just so incredibly immoral in the way that he is taking away people's rights, pretending that people's rights don't exist, and specifically, it was about a week ago, and it seems to have already been flushed away from the news, that he broke up a funeral with police. And there can be, I can't think of anything more just, I don't know, sacrilegious, I guess? It's just wrong. And it was this Jewish funeral, and they were like honoring the life rather, of a rabbi who had died. And yes, there were a lot of people at this funeral. I don't care. I legitimately don't care how many people were at a funeral. Imagine someone close to you, imagine the closest person to you died, and the city mayor said, you don't have a right to a funeral. You don't have the right to grieve as you wish. You don't have the right to practice your faith, as obviously there's a faith component to funerals, as you wish. That's what this guy did. I mean, you had these people who were honoring the memory of their rabbi. Let's see, I can go ahead and pull. I mean, yes, there were lots of people. I guess the guy was well loved. What can I say? I don't care. They have a right to attend a funeral, of all places. But instead, not only did he show up, or send police to show up, and personally show up, with, the sirens going, and, it was there on the loudspeaker, telling people to disperse. And then he tweets this: "My message to the Jewish community, and all communities, is this simple. The time for warnings has passed. I have instructed the NYPD to proceed immediately to summons or even arrest those who gather in large groups. This is about stopping this disease and saving lives." There's something that seems really ironic to me about the fact that people have been calling Trump literally Hitler for at least 3 years, probably more like 4, because it was, pre-election. And they're now defending this guy who wants to round up Jews because they're having a funeral in the way that they want. I mean, is there not something just really incredibly ironic? And by the way, in case it wasn't clear, they have the right to practice their faith. It is a constitutionally protected right. They also have the right to freely assemble, which is also a constitutionally protected right. But this guy doesn't care about rights in the least. Yes, and I've heard the people who are defending him, the people who are on the left, who are defending him because he's not all that bad, you see. He's not going after Jews, he's just going after the Jews who practice their religion. Just going after Jews at funerals. It's just like these stretches are just so kind of extreme. And by the way, since I did mention Trump, I do want to say, it's an understatement to say that I don't think he's done enough with this whole Chinese coronavirus situation, or rather, the response to it. Basically, what he did, his strategy, was to basically tell the state governors to do whatever it is that they want. And he shouldn't have done that. At least, he could have said, do whatever you want up until you're infringing on people's rights. But instead, he acted like their infringement on people's rights was okay. That people didn't have rights. And I find this really disturbing. And now he's sort of trying to roll it back and tell states to reopen at the right pace. But it's like once you tell these would-be dictators that it's okay to play king, you can't reverse it. There's no real turning back from that. That there is a constitution. This sort of behavior isn't allowed. And he needed to come out in the early days of this and say people's rights matter. And now he's still telling people, not to open up too quickly. I mean, when you have would-be dictators, or in this case, acting dictators, there isn't many ways to turn back from that if you look historically. Like, historically speaking, the only way to turn back from, tyranny is generally bloodshed. That's why it was so important in the early days for him to say, rights matter, for example. Yeah, it's like Trump was great on the economy, prior to this virus. He was great on the economy. Starting the trade war with China, I was fully in favor, because we need to cancel our reliance on that evil dictatorship. But he doesn't seem to care or know much about the Bill of Rights, and that's really disturbing. Don't get me wrong, I still hope that he wins because the alternatives are unthinkable. I've found myself really frustrated with his lack of speaking up and saying, hey, governors, you can't do that. This is America, and here we care. We care about people's individual rights. Loki707 says you can vote your way into communism, but you have to shoot your way out of it. Right, that's the problem. That's what I fear. And it does seem interesting that now we have basically adopted all the tenets of communism, right? We've adopted everything that the leftists wanted and more. We have like this universal basic income now. We've destroyed our economy. For what? I mean, and all of this. And it just seems really convenient to me. And by the way, when I talk about these Jews who are gathering here, I made the same arguments and still do when I reported on the mayors that were attacking Christian worshippers, which we've seen throughout the country. I have yet to see anyone trying to prevent Muslim worship, which is particularly interesting. But, when Christians even tried to do drive-up worships and they were fined just arbitrary amounts, I think $500 over in Mississippi, it's incredibly immoral. More people need to be, speaking up about it. But remember, Bill de Blasio, that's the same guy who was largely silent on the attacks on Jews in New York City by Muslims, to add extra context. And I think that's one of the reasons that so many Jews are really upset, because they're like, well, you constantly let, Muslims attack us, don't do anything about it, don't talk about those as hate crimes like you do when other races are involved. And, here he is attacking the Jews. I think that their complaints there seem pretty well-founded. And then you've got stuff like this. To the Muslim New Yorkers beginning their celebrations tonight who need halal meals, we have them across our 400-plus grab-and-go meal sites, and are bringing hundreds of thousands more to the 32 sites most frequented by our Muslim communities. Firstly, the method in which animals are slaughtered to make them halal is grotesque, and frankly, just look it up. Just look it up. It's honestly so cruel. So there's that, but then there's also the fact that, did he do something equivalent for, say, the Christians who were observing Lent? Did he have the fish sandwiches ready for them? No. No, he's just appeasing one group of people. Yeah. Rock and Roll Cola says an anti-Semitic jihadist in New York as mayor. It would seem so from his actions. Okay, let's move on, all right? But stay on Bill de Blasio, because he's now doubling down. And he's not... That was just one thing, almost a week ago. But now he wants to ban all protests. This is what I mean. You give them a little bit of power, a little bit more power, and they'll just take it all and never give it up. So, here we are at Fox. De Blasio and the New York Police Department Commissioner, no protests allowed in New York City. Okay, it sounds like a joke, but it's actually serious. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and New York NYPD Commissioner Derbot Shea stated outright this week that people are not permitted to gather for protests in public due to the coronavirus pandemic. That's it, your rights are on hold, guys. The city leaders pointed to the need to maintain social distancing in order to prevent greater spread of COVID-19, stating that this takes precedence over people's rights to exercise their First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly. No, they don't. That's the thing. It's not up for Bill de Blasio and some police commissioner to decide the precedence of your rights versus their convenience. It was already decided. It was decided several hundred years ago by a set of founding fathers who would have probably hung Bill de Blasio for treason by now. It's been decided. It's not up to him like, well, I know that you have rights, care about them so much, but they're on pause. Like, that wasn't part of the deal. The Constitution is there to, to offer restraint, to say, actually, these are our rights, our natural rights. You cannot, under any circumstances, infringe on these. Under any circumstances. But he's got, his yes man there saying, yep, no protests in our city. Let's continue. You're talking about some of the values we hold in the highest regard in this country, and certainly in this city. The right for people to gather, the right to free speech, and the right to protest, Shea said during a Monday press briefing. But now comes the bad news. We're in a pandemic, and executive orders have been issued. These are laws that have been passed through executive order to keep people alive. While we greatly, greatly respect the right of people to protest, there should not be protests taking place in the middle of a pandemic by gathering outside and putting people at risk. Okay, there is so much wrong with this paragraph all at once. Okay, first of all, they don't care about the right of people to gather and the right to free speech and the right to protest. They've made that very clear. You can't say, oh, we care about it except for it's on pause and so now you don't have those rights. All right, but they also say executive orders have been issued. These are laws that have been passed. No, executive orders aren't laws that have been passed. Passed by whom? An executive order is just, essentially a letter that the person who wrote it signed. That's not how a law is passed in any free nation or any free state. An executive order is supposed to be used so that the governor or, or president in some cases can give an order to his agencies to tell them how to operate a certain thing. They're not supposed to be used, to make up laws on a whim. It's not supposed to be like, well, the legislature, it takes a while to get something passed, so I'll tell you what, I'll just go ahead and write my own. And it's much easier that way, much faster. That's not what an executive order is. Else, if that's what executive orders really were, there would be no reason for a legislature. There wouldn't. You just say, oh, we've got the dictator, and it's a heck of a lot faster, a lot more convenient. Because it is for the dictator. But that's what they're actually saying here. That they are laws. These are laws that have been passed. And this is the NYPD commissioner here saying this, saying that this is a law that has been passed. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Sometimes it's just like, I'm so flabbergasted by people in positions of power who are supposed to, know our rights, that I don't even know what to say. But executive orders are administrative orders, for governmental agencies. Tell them how to do something differently, not for the people. For the people, you actually have to have a law. You have a legislature that has to, argue about it, perhaps dismiss it. Most of the time, dismiss it. And every once in a while, they'll send a law to the desk of the governor or of the president at the national level. But it's not supposed to be, creating laws and then telling the police department that you run that they enforce it. Go enforce the law that I just wrote. I mean, my gosh. And then, with laws, then the courts often strike them out and say, nope, actually that infringes on something. But in the case of these executive orders, it's like everything's been placed on hold. Suddenly the courts are expected to pretend like these are laws? It's abhorrent. It is truly abhorrent. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.